Nina's ship, the Seraph, streaked through the Earth's atmosphere, flames engulfing its hull as it descended uncontrollably towards the dense forests of Montana. Inside, Nina braced against the controls, her silver skin glowing faintly under the console lights, her eyes fixed on the rapidly approaching ground. The ship hit the forest with a thunderous crash, trees snapping like twigs, a cloud of dirt and debris mushrooming into the sky. As the dust settled, the damaged ship lay wedged between the shattered trunks, steam and smoke hissing from its fissures. Groaning, Nina unbuckled herself and checked her injuries, minor cuts and bruises, nothing severe. She activated her communicator, trying to send a distress signal back to Xyleria, but static crackled through the speaker. Nothing. She was alone, possibly stranded on a foreign planet that might not welcome her kind. Meanwhile, Jake, a former military scout turned wildlife photographer, was setting up his camera by a nearby lake when he heard the crash. Startled, he grabbed his binoculars and scanned the horizon, spotting the smoke rising above the trees. Curiosity piqued. He packed his gear into his old, reliable Jeep and headed towards the source. As he approached, he saw the alien craft. "Holy," he muttered to himself, his hand instinctively going to the sidearm he carried. Warily, he approached the ship, his military instincts kicking in. He could hear faint noises from inside. Someone was alive. Nina emerged from the wreckage, her luminous eyes widening as she saw Jake approaching. She backed away, her hand reaching for a weapon at her belt. "Wait," Jake called out, stopping in his tracks with his hands raised. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here to help." Nina paused, assessing him. "How do I know I can trust you?" she asked, her voice carrying an alien accent, tinged with fear. "You don't," Jake admitted, keeping his voice calm. "But you're injured, and your ship looks like it's seen better days. I have some medical supplies and tools back at my place. Let me help you." Nina considered his offer. Her ship was beyond self-repair, and she didn't know the first thing about Earth's technology. She could handle the wilderness of her world, but this was different, alien. "Okay," she finally said, lowering her weapon. "But one false move and I'm gone." "Fair enough," Jake replied with a nod, leading the way back to his Jeep. As they drove, Jake tried to make small talk, keeping the atmosphere light. "So, not from around here, huh? I'm Jake, by the way." "Nina," she replied shortly, looking out the window at the passing scenery, her mind racing with thoughts of her next move. "Welcome to Earth, Nina," Jake said, a hint of a smile on his face. "It's not always this dramatic, I promise." She turned to look at him, a ghost of a smile on her lips. "I hope not," she said. But inside she wondered if she had jumped from one form of danger into another. Yet, as they continued their journey, something in Jake's demeanor suggested that perhaps, on this strange new world, not everyone was an enemy. Jake drove in silence for a few minutes, allowing Nina to take in the surroundings. His old Jeep rumbled along the uneven forest path, bouncing over roots and rocks. The dense canopy overhead barely let any sunlight through, casting everything in a soft green gloom that seemed to calm Nina's visible tension. "You're the first alien I've ever met," Jake finally said, breaking the silence. "This is kind of a big deal for me." Nina turned her gaze from the window and looked at him, her eyes narrowing slightly. "And you are the first human I have interacted with, so I suppose we are even." Jake chuckled. "I guess we are." They arrived at Jake's cabin, a small, sturdy structure hidden away in the midst of towering pines. It was remote, peaceful, perfect for someone looking to stay under the radar. As they entered, Jake led Nina to a small medical kit. "Here, let me see those cuts." Nina hesitated, then slowly extended her arm. Jake applied some antiseptic and bandaged the minor wounds. His hands were steady and his touch gentle, which surprised her given his rugged appearance. "Why are you helping me?" Nina asked, watching him closely. Jake stopped and looked up at her. "Because it's the right thing to do. I can't just leave someone out there hurt, not even, well, an alien." Nina nodded, still unsure about his motives but grateful for the help. "Thank you, Jake." Jake smiled. "You're welcome. Let's get you something to eat and then we can check out your ship. See what we can do about it." They moved to the kitchen area where Jake rummaged through his pantry. He handed her a can of soup and a spoon. "It's not much, but it should be edible for you." Nina examined the can curiously, then tasted the soup cautiously. It was strange, but not unpleasant. "It's good," she decided, and Jake seemed pleased. After the meal, they prepared to return to the crash site. Jake packed tools and some spare parts he thought might be useful. He also grabbed a handheld device. "This is a GPS unit. Helps you know where you are," he explained, handing it to her. Nina accepted it, studying the blinking lights and maps that showed their location. "Technology is different here, but some principles seem universal," she remarked. "Yeah, guess the basics of getting lost and finding your way are the same everywhere," Jake said as they walked back to his Jeep. As they drove back to the site, Jake glanced at Nina. "You know, you haven't told me why you ended up here. It's pretty obvious you were running from something." Nina looked out the window, her expression darkening. "It's a long story," she began, "one filled with betrayal and exile. I'm not sure you'd understand." "Try me," Jake encouraged, his voice gentle. "I've got my own share of demons, so maybe I can relate more than you think." As the forest gave way to the clearing where her ship lay hidden, Nina took a deep breath, ready to share her story, feeling a strange sense of trust in her human companion. Under the shade of towering pines, Jake and Nina approached the wreckage of the Seraph. The sight of the twisted metal and scorched earth where it had skidded to a halt made Nina's heart sink. She feared the worst. Without the ship, she was stranded. Jake, seeing her dismay, put a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Let's just see what we're dealing with first. Maybe it's not as bad as it looks." They spent the next few hours examining the ship. Jake was no expert in alien technology, but he was skilled with machinery and could make educated guesses about the basic mechanics. Nina, grateful for his initiative, guided him through the Seraph's more exotic systems. As they worked, Nina began to open up about her past on Xylaria. "I was a researcher," she explained, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "I studied interstellar travel and energy systems, but my ideas were controversial." "Controversial how?" Jake asked, handing her a tool while he listened. "I believed that Xylaria should share its technology with other civilizations, help them develop. But our leaders wanted to hoard it, use it to dominate." Jake nodded. "Power does strange things to people, no matter the planet, huh?" Nina laughed softly, a sound filled with sadness and irony. "Yes, exactly. When I voiced my objections, I was accused of treason. My own colleagues turned against me." "That's rough," Jake said sincerely, his eyes meeting hers. "But why Earth? Why come here?" "It was the closest habitable planet when I fled. Plus, I had studied your culture, your languages. I thought I might fit in," Nina confessed, though the crash landing had clearly not been part of her plan. Jake was impressed. "Well, you picked a beautiful spot to crash, at least." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the forest, they managed to power up the ship's primary systems, though flight capabilities were still offline. Nina sighed with relief. Not everything was lost. "Looks like you might be here for a while," Jake remarked as they sat down outside the ship, watching the sky turn fiery with dusk. "It seems so," Nina agreed. "I'll need to find a way to blend in, avoid detection." "I can help with that," Jake offered. "You helped me understand your tech. I can help you understand Earth." Nina smiled at him, a genuine smile that lit up her eyes. "Thank you, Jake, for everything." That night, as they made their way back to the cabin, a plan began to form. They would hide the ship better, camouflage it from any prying eyes, and start working on a more permanent repair. Nina would also need to learn more about Earth, its cultures, and its technologies. Jake felt a renewed sense of purpose. Helping Nina felt right, and her trust in him had given him a new ally, a friend from a world beyond his imagination. For Nina, Earth was beginning to feel less like an exile and more like a refuge, a place where maybe, just maybe, she could start anew. The days turned into weeks as Jake and Nina worked tirelessly on the Seraph. They had managed to conceal it effectively with camouflage netting and natural foliage, and it was now almost invisible against the forest backdrop. Nina learned quickly, absorbing everything Jake taught her about Earth, its history, and its technologies, blending in more with each passing day. One evening, as they reviewed maps for a more secure hideout location, Jake's old radio scanner, left idly scanning frequencies, crackled to life. Nina's head snapped up as she recognized the coded signals. Not from Earth. "They found me," she whispered, her face pale. Jake moved to the radio, adjusting the frequency. "Who has?" he asked. "My people. They've tracked the distress signal before I could shut it down." "They're here, Jake," Nina explained, her voice tense. Jake's mind raced. He had grown to see Nina not just as a friend, but as someone he was responsible for. What do we do? Can we fight them? Nina shook her head. We can't fight them, not directly. They have technology far beyond anything you've seen. Our best chance is to evade capture. Deciding they needed to leave immediately, they packed supplies into Jake's jeep. The scanner continued to intercept sporadic communications between the alien search teams. Using this to their advantage, Nina pinpointed their search patterns, giving Jake enough information to chart a route that avoided detection. As they drove through the forest under the cover of darkness, Jake saw Nina's hands clenched tightly. He reached over, covering one with his own. We'll get through this, he reassured her. They drove all night, reaching an old lookout point Jake used during his military days. It was isolated, difficult to access unless one knew the exact paths. At dawn, they watched from their high vantage point. Nina used a small, sophisticated device to scan the area. They're sweeping north, away from us, she noted, relief evident in her tone. That's good, right? Jake asked. Yes, but we can't stay here long. They will widen their search. We need a long-term plan, Nina replied, her mind already racing through options. Jake nodded. I know some places off the grid. Old bunkers, abandoned towns, places people forget about. Nina smiled weakly. Your Earth is full of secrets and solitude. It's kept me company, Jake said with a shrug. Now, let's make it work for us. They spent the day making preparations to move again, gathering supplies and reinforcing the jeep for rough terrain. As they worked, the gravity of their situation weighed heavily on them, but so did the bond they were forging. In a world where Nina had felt hated and hunted, Jake's loyalty and protection offered a stark contrast. That night, as they sat by a small fire, Jake looked over at Nina. You know, back in the military, I learned that sometimes you have to rely on others. I never thought I'd be teaming up with someone from another planet. Nina chuckled, the sound mingling with the crackling of the fire. Neither did I, Jake. Neither did I. As the fire died down, they planned their next moves, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. The next morning brought a gray, overcast sky that seemed to press down on them with the weight of their situation. Jake and Nina packed up their sparse camp at the lookout point and set off once again, deeper into the less charted parts of the wilderness. Jake's knowledge of survival and evasion tactics from his military days now proved invaluable. We'll head to an old mining town next, Jake explained as he drove. The town was abandoned in the 80s after the mine dried up. It's off most current maps and hard to access without knowing the trails. That sounds perfect, Nina responded, her eyes scanning the dense forest that blurred by. She was visibly on edge, constantly checking her device for any signs of alien activity nearby. As they reached the abandoned town, the sight of dilapidated buildings and overgrown roads lent an eerie feel to their refuge. They chose a small house on the outskirts, which provided a clear view of the only approach road. Setting up their temporary home, Nina laid out the alien technology she had salvaged from her ship, devices that could warn them of incoming threats and mask their presence. These will give us a warning if they get close, she explained, showing Jake how to read the signals. Jake nodded, understanding the gravity of their reliance on this technology. And if they do get close? We hide or we run, Nina said flatly. There's no fighting them with what we have. The following days were a tense game of cat and mouse. They organized the house to allow for quick escapes and took turns keeping watch. Despite the constant threat, Jake and Nina grew closer, their conversations wandering from the immediate danger to dreams of what peace might look like. One evening, as they shared a makeshift meal, Jake asked, "What was it like, your planet, before all this?" Nina paused, her fork midway to her mouth. "Beautiful," she began, her voice soft. Vast oceans that glowed with bioluminescent life, mountains that reached into the clouds, cities that spiraled into the skies. But power corrupted our leaders. Fear became a tool to govern, and those who opposed them were... Her voice trailed off, lost in painful memories. Jake reached across the small table, placing his hand over hers. "I'm sorry, Nina. For all of it." Nina met his gaze, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "Thank you, Jake, for this peace, brief as it may be." Their time at the abandoned town passed with no signs of the alien pursuers, but the scanner Nina had set up finally broke the silence one morning. The device beeped rapidly, indicating that something was amiss. "They've changed their strategy," Nina said after checking the readings. "It looks like they're using wider sweeps, more random. They might not know exactly where we are, but they're getting desperate and covering more ground." We need to move again, Jake concluded, already starting to pack up their few belongings. As they prepared to leave the shelter of the old mining town, the reality of their situation settled in deeper. They were two against an unknown number, fighting with cunning and hope against superior technology and relentless pursuers. Driving away from the mining town, Jake looked in the rearview mirror at the fading outlines of the houses, engulfed by nature once again. "Where to next?" he asked. "Somewhere new, somewhere safe, even if just for a little while," Nina replied, her voice steady despite the uncertainty of their future. Their journey continued, the bond between them deepening, forged in the fires of shared adversity and a growing sense of mutual trust and care. As Jake and Nina navigated further into the remote wilderness, the terrain became rougher, the roads narrower, and the signs of human habitation scarcer. They found refuge in an old ranger station, a place that even time seemed to have forgotten. With winter approaching, they decided it was a good place to stay put for a while, hidden by the natural barrier of dense woods and the looming mountains. Inside the creaky old cabin, they set about making it livable, repairing the broken windows and patching up the holes in the roof. As they worked side by side, the barriers between them, one from Earth and one from Xylaria, began to dissolve further. One chilly evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Jake decided to ask Nina more about the technology of her people. "You know, you've told me a lot about Xylaria, but not much about the tech that got you here," he said, stoking the fire to keep the cabin warm. Nina looked thoughtful, her eyes reflecting the dance of the flames. "Our technology is based on energy harnessing from the universe itself, not just from suns, but from the fabric of space-time. It's what powered my ship, and what I fear they're using to try to find me." "That's way beyond anything we have here," Jake admitted, his mind struggling to grasp the concept. "Is there anything we can use, any of that tech, to protect you better?" "We can try," Nina said, getting up to retrieve a small device from her bag. "This is a phase modulator. It can bend light and other emissions around us, making the cabin invisible to most sensors." She showed Jake how to activate it, her hands deftly adjusting the settings. Jake watched in awe as the air around the cabin shimmered slightly before settling. "Invisible, huh? Wish I had one of these during my army days," he joked, but he was impressed and a bit uneasy about the power of the device. As days turned into weeks, they established a routine, sharing stories and skills. Jake taught Nina how to identify edible plants and track animals, essential skills for living off the grid. In return, Nina taught Jake some basic Xylarian language and writing, which fascinated him. During one lesson, Nina paused, looking hesitant. "Jake, I've been thinking," she started slowly. "Back on Xylaria, I was working on a project, one that could, well, it could change things, make a difference, but I would need to finish it, and I can't do that here." Jake listened intently, sensing the importance of her words. "What kind of project, and how can I help?" "It's a form of energy that could power worlds without pollution or depletion. It could also be a weapon if it fell into the wrong hands," she explained, her voice heavy with responsibility. "We need to keep it out of the wrong hands, then," Jake said decisively. "Tell me what you need, Nina. We'll find a way to make it happen." Nina smiled, her spirits lifted by his unwavering support. "Thank you, Jake. I might need some materials that aren't exactly common, even on Earth." "We'll find them," Jake assured her. "We'll keep moving, keep staying one step ahead, and we'll find what you need." Their conversation deepened their bond, a fusion of mutual respect and shared goals. Together in the hidden ranger station, under the vast, starry sky, they planned their next moves, not just for survival, but for a chance to impact a world, her world and his. The weeks turned into months, and as the harsh winter began to yield to the early signs of spring, Jake and Nina had managed to gather most of the materials needed for her project. They moved again, deeper into an area known for its geological anomalies, which Nina explained would help mask the energy signature of her work. They set up in an old, abandoned logging camp, with structures sturdy enough to withstand the remaining winter weather. Here, Nina began assembling her device, a compact but complex apparatus designed to harness and redistribute energy in a way that could revolutionize power usage. As Nina worked, Jake patrolled the area, keeping an eye out for any signs of the alien pursuers or unwelcome human attention. Despite the calm of the past few months, he knew the threat lingered, a constant shadow over their relative peace. One crisp morning, while checking the perimeter, Jake's makeshift alarm system, A network of tripwires and sensors he had rigged around the camp was triggered. He rushed back, signaling to Nina to hide. As he approached, he saw figures moving through the trees. Not the alien hunters they had anticipated, but a group of armed humans, likely scavengers drawn by the rumors of strange activities in the woods. "Nina, stay out of sight," Jake whispered into his communicator, his voice tense. He took cover behind one of the larger buildings, watching as the group approached. "We know you're here," called out the leader of the scavengers, a large man with a grizzled beard and wary eyes. "Come on out and let's talk." Jake stepped out, hands raised to show he was unarmed. "I'm alone," he lied. "What do you want?" "We've heard stories about this place. Things happening, things that shouldn't be possible," the man replied suspiciously. "We want in on whatever you've got here." "There's nothing here for you," Jake said firmly, his mind racing for solutions. The standoff was interrupted by the sudden, piercing whine of energy. Nina's device. It powered up unexpectedly, reacting to the increased tension and the proximity of potential threats. The air shimmered, and a visible wave of energy pulsed outwards, knocking the scavengers off their feet and rendering their electronic devices useless. Taking advantage of their confusion, Jake quickly subdued the leader, disarming him. "You need to leave. Now," he commanded, his stance uncompromising. The scavengers, dazed and frightened by the display of unknown technology, scrambled to their feet and fled, leaving behind their weapons and a few pieces of electronic gear. Once the danger had passed, Nina emerged from her hiding place, her expression a mix of relief and concern. "I didn't mean for it to activate. It sensed the threat and reacted to protect us," she explained, looking at the device, which had now quieted. Jake nodded, understanding the implications. "It's more powerful than we thought, and more dangerous in the wrong hands." As they assessed the situation, they realized the time had come to make a final decision. With the device completed and its capabilities confirmed, they faced a new reality. They could no longer hide. It was time to take action, to use Nina's invention not just for survival, but for a greater purpose. "I need to finish this, Jake. Not just for us, but for everyone. For Earth and Xyleria," Nina said resolutely. Jake agreed, the weight of their next steps settling on his shoulders. "We'll do it together," he promised. And with that, they began planning their next move, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them in the final chapter of their journey. In the wake of the confrontation with the scavengers, Jake and Nina knew they had to act swiftly. The incident had proven that the device not only worked, but was potentially more powerful and far-reaching than they had initially imagined. They spent the next few days preparing, knowing that they needed to move the device to a secure location where it could be used safely and for the greater good. The plan was to head to an international science facility in Greenland, where Nina could collaborate with Earth's top scientists under conditions of strict anonymity, ensuring the safety and ethical use of her technology. Jake had made contact with a trusted former colleague who could facilitate their discreet transfer to the facility. As they dismantled their makeshift lab, Nina turned to Jake. "What will you do once this is over?" she asked, a hint of melancholy in her voice. Jake, who had been avoiding this very question, kept his focus on his task. "I don't know," he admitted. "Guess I'll go back to my old life, quiet and simple." Nina stopped, placing her hand on his. "You could come with me," she suggested softly. "There's a place for you in this new world we're building." Jake smiled sadly. "My place is here, Nina, but I'll always be there if you need me. Always." Their journey to Greenland was tense and fraught with caution. They traveled undercover, using back roads and chartered unmarked flights. Upon arriving, they were whisked away to the facility, a sprawling complex designed for high-security scientific research. Nina was quickly absorbed into the team, her expertise and the device both regarded as revolutionary. The days turned into weeks, and Jake found himself on the outskirts of the project, his part in Nina's story reaching its natural conclusion. As the day came for the official testing of the device, Nina found Jake packing his belongings in the small room he had been provided. "It's time for me to head back," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Jake," Nina started, her voice thick with emotion. "You've changed my life. Because of you, we're about to change the world." Jake looked up, his expression softening. "And you changed mine, Nina. Don't forget that." They embraced, a long, poignant moment filled with unspoken words and shared memories. Then, with one last look, Jake turned and left. Nina watched him go, feeling the bittersweet pang of their parting. She turned back to the facility, where her new colleagues awaited her, ready to harness the potential of her discovery. As the device powered up, successfully and without incident, Nina knew that a new chapter was beginning for both her people and Earth. From that day forward, the energy revolution began. Clean, limitless power gradually became a reality, transforming societies and industries. Nina became a pivotal figure in the new energy movement, her vision and tenacity leading the way. Meanwhile, Jake returned to his life in Montana, often gazing up at the stars, wondering about Nina and the vast universe. His life was quieter, but he carried the profound impact of their encounter, knowing he had helped shape a better future. In the deep reaches of space, Nina's accomplishments echoed, eventually reaching Xyleria. While she never returned to her home planet, her legacy did, changing minds and policies in her wake. Their story was a testament to the power of collaboration, belief, and the unyielding hope of two unlikely allies who dared to dream of a better tomorrow.